Okay, I'm going to pick up this portion of the lecture with the English succession. This table might look a little bit confusing at first, but I am going to make it make sense, and I'll do it pretty quickly. So we're going to begin at the top, not with that square. That's where I'm going to stop for a second to talk some more, but we're going to begin at the top with William the First. This is William the Conqueror. He came to England from Normandy or Norman France in 1066 and conquered the land of England, right? He took control of the dynasty, therefore, and his sons came to power after him. So you can see that under William the First and his wife Matilda is Henry the First, okay? But you can also see that Henry the First does not lead directly to Henry the Second in that red square. What happened with Henry the First is that his son, William, Duke of Normandy, died at sea. He was supposed to be the person who came to the throne. What happened is that his sister, Matilda, who you can see right underneath her mother and Henry the First there, ended up coming to the throne, and she is the queen that gave birth to Henry II. However, before that could happen, Matilda was really only king for a few days. I mean, queen for a few days. Before Henry II came to the throne, there was actually a terrible civil war called the Anarchy. We tend to call the war that took place in the 17th century the English Civil War, but there was one that happened before that in the 1100s. Matilda, who was married to Geoffrey of Anjou here in the middle, and Stephen, who you can see in all caps on the right-hand side of the screen, who was also married to someone named Matilda. It gets a little complicated. Um, Stephen and that Matilda had a civil war. They didn't think that a woman could come to power. Stephen also had a claim to the throne through his family. And so these cousins were at war with one another during a period called the Anarchy. What happened basically is that Stephen won the war, but his two sons died, and he had no descendants to take the throne. And Matilda and Geoffrey were able to strike a deal saying, okay, you can finish as king, but our son, Henry, is going to come to the throne after you. And that's what happened. Henry II is the first Plantagenet king. You can see his wife Eleanor there beside that red square. That is Eleanor of Aquitaine. She's from France. And their sons came to the throne after them. Their sons came to the throne. They had three. First, William, he died, then Richard the First, then King John. So if you remember Robin Hood stories, this is good King Richard and bad King John. Okay, um, that's um, that's who these people are. The succession was more or less untroubled after all of this happened. There's not a lot of trouble here. Here's where we get into some trouble. Okay, Edward III comes to the throne, and his sons, he's got four of them, all have a claim. Okay. The Black Prince dies before he is able to come to the throne. And then his son, Richard II, comes to the throne because English succession is patrilineal. It passes from father to son, from father to son. So Edward III died, and his grandson, Richard II, came to the throne. Okay, this is normal, but Richard II was a weak king and he was deposed before he was killed. He was deposed by Henry IV, who you can see circled in a slightly different color red on this chart here. You can see that Henry IV is descended from John, the Duke of Lancaster. Another name for this man named John is John of Gaunt. He was a patron of Chaucer's, and so all of these people on the line with John of Gaunt and Richard II, actually too, um, Chaucer was alive during their lives and writing during that time. So Henry said that he had a better claim to the throne than these other folks. Okay, all right. Um, Now, the succession after Henry IV is also fairly straightforward. Henry IV goes to Henry V, goes to Henry VI. Okay. We get some problems coming in, however, at around this time. So these pink circles are a line from John of Gaunt's brother, the fourth brother. Okay, this is the York line. John of Gaunt's line is the Lancastrian line. And these are the two factions at war during the War of the Roses. The Lancastrian line has a claim through that fourth brother. The the Lancastrian line has a claim through John of Gaunt and Henry IV. The York line has a claim through that fourth son, whose name is, you can see, Edmund of Langley. So this is where the clash comes from in our play. And these are the characters that are still alive during our play. Um, so um, Here you can see that, okay, so not all of these people are still alive during our play, but some of them are. Here's Richard III that comes to, this is the guy who our play is about, this yellow square on the right. Um, Edward IV and Edward V are both in the play as well. Edward IV is the person who is holding the crown at the beginning of the action of Richard III. Edward V is the son of Edward IV. He does come to the crown, but you can see that Richard takes over historically just 2 years after that. And so there's some problems happening in our play, and we will get to them. We will definitely talk about them very soon. After Richard III comes to the throne, he is engaged in battle with Henry VII, and our play ends with Henry VII, the first of the Tudor kings, coming to the throne. Henry VII begins the Tudor dynasty, and therefore the dynasty in which Shakespeare lives, and that's why he's got a heart around him. Shakespeare was very much a part of the times that he lived in. The Tudors were beloved. Richard III was seen as not only not a great king, but not a great person. And we'll talk more about that soon. But this is the Tudor dynasty from Henry VII to Henry VIII, who had 6 wives and founded the Church of England, as you may recall, to Mary I and then Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I did not have children, and she named James as her successor. He technically starts the Stuart dynasty. So we need to think about these stories that we tell ourselves. The Tudors were very invested in their lineage and their claim to the throne, and Elizabeth constantly fought off threats to her throne, especially from members of the Lancastrian and York lines. Therefore, the Tudors were incredibly invested in villainizing their foes.